Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second in our Masters of AI series at Fiverr, SEO Prompts and App Fusion. We're really excited to have you here today, where we'll hear from AI expert and app builder Mark Kashef and prompt engineering and SEO specialist Jonathan Lewis about how AI can be adapted to enhance other technologies and also improve your efficiency in running a business. So I'm now going to call on our first presenter, Mark Kashef, and have him introduce himself to everyone.
Hey, can anyone hear me?
So we're having a little bit of trouble connecting with Mark, so I'm actually going to bring on Jonathan to introduce himself first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jonathan Lewis. I've been working on Fiverr as a freelancer since February of 2023, shortly before AI gigs opened up. And I noticed just as I was messing around with ChatGPT that there were many instances of where it would just spit out incorrect facts. And I saw an opportunity to work alongside writers who'd be using this technology to kind of punch up and ensure that what they're presenting to their bosses and to their customers are accurate and factual.
Thanks, Jonathan. And now we're going to go ahead and hear from Mark, who will introduce himself.
Awesome. Yeah. So my name is Mark. I've been on the platform ever since late last year, near December, probably like a few days after ChatGPT came out. I looked at it, and given my background in AI for the past decade, I thought it would be a really good idea to see what market was out there in terms of the appetite for AI learning on Fiverr, now that there was a bit more of a great equalizer. So I started that journey in December, and then things really kicked off in February to March. And by April, May, everyone wanted to know how to use it, what it was, and how it could transform their business. So it really supercharged what I'm doing here on Fiverr right now, which is across the gamut from building AI tools to writing prompts for people to optimizing systems and throwing AI where it fits best.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark and Jonathan, for introducing yourselves. Now we're going to move into some questions for our panelists today about AI and how working with these experts can help you with your business. And the first thing I'll ask each of our panelists is to describe what brought you to Fiverr and why you continue to work on the platform. So I'll pass it to Jonathan first and then Mark.
Okay. So Fiverr, I think for me, is just the opportunity to work with skills that I've not necessarily used in a full-time position, but still have acquired, whether through my degree program or just through hobbies, and the ability to very easily access clients. And it's a great communication platform. Especially enjoy the video conferencing. So when I have a particularly complex project, I can speak directly with my customers. And it's also the ability to, on weeks where I'm a little bit less committed, I can take on more work. And then if I need to scale back, I can scale back just as easily. And I think the flexibility that Fiverr offers its sellers is the big point of why I stuck around.
Thanks, Dr. Jonathan. And Mark?
Yeah, for sure. So the main thing for me was more so the global reach of Fiverr. If I ever made a business or set up shop, brick and mortar anywhere, I'd never get the opportunity to work with someone in South Africa, New Zealand, and Switzerland all at the same time. It not only kind of opens the market up in terms of understanding where my services fit best, but it gives me the ability to have reach that I would never have otherwise. And just like Jonathan said, I can manage my own schedule in terms of how many gigs I take on, how many projects I manage at one time. So being able to manage that funnel and make sure there's always quality control is a really big benefit of being on Fiverr versus doing it alone.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And I think those are all really good points that you all raised, just having a partner to really ensure quality control, and that you have someone working alongside you for these projects is really helpful. And I totally forgot to mention this earlier, but wanted to throw out there that anyone who has questions for our speakers today, you can see that QR code up in the corner of our broadcast. You could scan that with your phone and send us in a question. Other places you can add questions or comments are in the comment sections of our LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube streams. So I'll be monitoring all of those and we'll get to them at the end. For now, we'll head into our second question for our panelists. And this is, what inspired you to host an AI gig on your Fiverr profile? Describe the gig and why it's been successful for you. We'll hear from Mark first this time.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good. So way back when, I think last August, I was just experimenting with Fiverr, and I was basically helping people initially get good on posting nice pictures and descriptions of their cars on Turo, which is a completely different off the topic. And then as soon as the AI kind of wave came in, I'm like, okay, why not do something I'm passionate about and I would do for free, which is, just giving consultations to people to see if there was a market there. And as soon as there was a market, everyone from someone who's a journalist to someone who worked at the head of a company to a CEO wanted to get that step ahead and take advantage of that arbitrage. I started going from 1 gig to 3 gigs to 5 gigs to 10 gigs. And as I kind of rose through the ranks, I just saw more opportunities in the market that weren't addressed, or different pockets of the space that were kind of lagging in terms of hearing about ChatGPT. And I found it a really good area where everything would just flourish in terms of multi-industry demand for this type of services. I'll pass it on to Jonathan.
Thank you, Mark. So my AI journey actually started 3 or 4 years ago. I started a now sadly defunct edutech company with a professor of mine from my bachelor's degree and a couple of college classmates. And we tried to bring machine learning into the classrooms and get all students who are in a particular grade or a particular course subject playing at politics, basically. The way we kind of do science labs in high schools, we wanted to try and do the same with history, similar to like a Model UN, Model Congress type deal. And we were trying to massage machine learning to take different educational resources and learn each individual student's preferred style, preferred grade level, so that they were all operating on the same level, even though there may have been different abilities or different needs within the classroom. From there, I joined Fiverr after, unfortunately, lost funding with the interest rate hikes, and kind of continued on that same thing. It was like, all right, what can we do in the research space in factual articles using these new technologies, the LLMs? They're very good at synthesizing information, searching for information, and summarizing it. How can we train it to make sure it's accurate? Train it to make sure that it's presenting all sides of particular facts or particular, political beliefs, and ensure that it's a fair and just tool for everyone to use.
Thank you, Mark and Jonathan. And I think it's really interesting having you both on the panel today because you both have such incredibly different backgrounds and ways that you use AI in your professions. And yet in both industries, it's become so necessary and commonplace to have familiarity with that technology. So it's really cool having you both on today to hear more about that. And so this brings me to my next question, and that's to describe what industry you work in currently and how the developments in AI are changing the way that they operate. So we'll head to Jonathan first and then Mark.
Okay. I'll try and keep it brief. So I mostly work in writing, editing, and also research. And I think AI is right now, the technology is right about there to start blowing all this up. I think on the positive side, we're going to see a lot of time saved by researchers, especially in science, of being able to search old articles, get up to speed on whatever their project will be. And, saving a ton of time for anyone who's done a master's thesis or PhD thesis of just ensuring that you have the background information you need to do your own study and advance the field. On the dark side of things, I think we're going to see an oversaturation in marketing very quickly. These softwares are ideal for search engine optimization with Google, and it's going to be, you get yours up at 2 p.m., someone else gets theirs up at 2:01 p.m., they're going to win. And it's going to be a lot of that. And then also we're seeing this in creative field with the Hollywood writer strike, and the studios want to use AI for scripting and want to use AI for computer-generated graphics and computer-generated people and actors. And I think we're going to see a lot of disruption in there, and probably a lot of very quick regulation coming in, at least in the United States. And I know it's happening in some countries in Europe as well, very quickly with the upcoming elections. And I can toss over to Mark.
Sure, yeah. In my case, I've had the opportunity to be more industry agnostic in an amazing way. So if I literally use my examples from yesterday, I had a discovery call with someone who sells truffles in Dubai, luxury truffles, and wants to streamline their legacy business, making hundreds of thousands per week, and automate their finance function, automate their email generation, lead acquisition. That's one side. And then I go all the way to like the Maldives, where someone wants to build a newsletter content generation for their travel site. And then you go to someone in Japan who's making an automated HR bot that goes from prospecting someone all the way to sending them to the first interview after going through the resume. So across the whole gamut, there's no limit as to like what I've been able to work on. Total number of industries, probably 7 at this point, with a really high emphasis lately on real estate, HR, marketing. And then you have the one-offs that I just mentioned, which make things very exciting and they keep it going. Overall, the most prevalent thing I'm seeing is that as people get frustrated with something that takes more than 3 to 5 hours that they do every day, they've started to ask that question: what happens, or is it possible to automate this with AI? That question is really starting to manifest across the world. And I think that's bringing a lot of demand to platforms like Fiverr.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And that's all really valuable insight. So thank you both for sharing. And I wanted to expand on this question even a little bit more. And I would love for each of you to share an instance where you successfully integrated AI into an existing technology or process. So I know that'll look different for both of y'all, but how did it result then in significant improvements? So we'll start with Jonathan and then go to Mark.
Okay. So for mine, one thing I really like is when you're starting to get writing about something. Let's just use a blog post as an example, a blog post on Formula One, since we're to Singapore this weekend. The ability to kind of play with the tone of the article extremely quickly by using specific prompts. So say, hey, I want to write for Nickelodeon Kids article. Can you explain as you would to a 5th grader, what's going on in the sport, maybe a little bit about the technology. Then you can punch it up and say, all right, I'm a master's student in engineering and I want to get up to speed on the current Formula One field, the tech regulations. And then say, oh, all right, let's try it maybe French. And just the ability to crank out 4 or 5 of those in about 20 minutes to really kind of mold what tone you want for the article. And as you then begin to edit it and get it correct for whatever source you're going to be writing for. And I can toss to Mark.
Yeah, for sure. I want to see if I can share this. If not, then no worries. Oh, good. Yeah, sure, that works. So pretty much one major thing that I encountered is while all the small, medium businesses, individuals were kind of running at AI, some companies that are very sensitive on the data front kind of were outside the water because they're afraid to use this stuff. They have patient level data. They have very important documents that can't be sent to an API, to ChatGPT. So they were kind of out of the game. So one of the most interesting products that we put together was basically an enterprise GPT where it's connected to a personal cloud. There's a private version of ChatGPT running behind the scenes. And the most important thing to the client we're working with, which was in the healthcare space, was that if they ever got a response, unlike ChatGPT, where it's kind of a black box, how it came up with that answer, it would tell you exactly which documents it referenced to come up with that specific answer and kind of use it as a citation. So in that way, it gave a lot more confidence to the client and their stakeholders that, one, the answer makes sense. It's not hallucinating, meaning it's not making up the answer. and two, there's grounded truth into where it's getting that information from. So that's one example of an implementation, and we see the need for more SOC 2 compliant, HIPAA compliant, and very secure implementations on the AI front as more enterprise clients start to dabble with it.
Right. Yeah, thank you both for sharing. Just a moment here. Sorry for the delay, you guys. Just 1 second. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. And thank you both for those really insightful answers. I think when it comes to integrating AI into existing technology and processes, I wanted to also touch on what kind of tools you all are using. So what 2 to 3 tools do you think that you're using now? And this is actually a question the panelists came up with themselves. What 2 to 3 tools that you're using now do you think will be relevant in several years? So we'll hear from Mark first and then Jonathan.
Sure, I'd love to see if there might be a debate between Jonathan and Linus, but on my end, I have 2 main tools. So those main tools truly are, I think ChatGPT will be around for the long haul. I think we saw the iPhone 1 version of ChatGPT. I think in the future, it'll be very different, where it's more of an oracle than it is a resource. Instead of Googling, you'll just go there first, almost viscerally. And then when it comes to the second tool that I think is going to stick around, its competitor called Anthropic. And the real difference between these 2 tools is ChatGPT is great on generating stuff from scratch and analyzing certain threshold documents, let's say 5 to 6 pages. Anthropic is a tool that specializes in taking a whole book all at once and being able to talk to that book. So I think there's going to be very fierce competition head to head between these 2 tools that will be able to, on one side, be really great at creating, and the other, really great at synthesizing very large amounts of data. And curious to see what Jonathan thinks.
Okay, so I do agree. I think ChatGPT is going to kind of be the standard, the Windows, if you will, of AI tools. And they've already integrated with Bing, and I'm sure that partnership is going to get stronger, especially I know that OpenAI is kind of financially rocky right now. And if they just get bought up, then yeah, they'll be around for a while. And I'd say the other tool hasn't been invented yet. If you had asked us in 2004 what video sharing platforms would exist, you'd say, well, it's going to be Google Video and MySpace. And 3 years later, well, there's Facebook and there's YouTube completely dominating the market. I think what Meta, Facebook has done in releasing kind of their platform of their own language model and just letting people cook. And then also, I know there's a lot of displaced tech workers recently. And I've been watching on GitHub over the summer, and I'm not super technical, but just seeing some of the stuff that people are cooking in their own garages, I don't think that the dominant AI tool that we'll be using in 2026 has been invented yet.
That's a really good point, Jonathan. And I think, if anyone were to ask you like what AI tool is going to be the most successful, like you honestly shouldn't have an answer. It has to be something that's going to be created later on. I feel like a lot of these tools kind of build on themselves and then a better version gets introduced a few months later. So I totally see what you're saying there. And Mark, I think what you brought up about there being tools that create and then tools that then synthesize everything and organize was also very interesting, because you really can't have one without the other, especially if you're trying to incorporate them in a business. So great point. Glad you guys added that question for me. And so for our next question, this actually kind of follows what we were just talking about. And this is that collaboration between domain experts and AI specialists is often crucial for successful AI integration. So Mark, big expert here. Could you elaborate on how you navigate this collaboration? And what strategies do you employ to ensure that AI solutions are tailored effectively to the specific needs of a project? We'll go ahead and hear from Mark first, and then Jonathan.
No, it's an awesome question, and it's a very tough question. So, if you could liken it to building a website, so if you go on Fiverr, you'll find tons of people that are amazing at building a website. But if you just say build a website, they will build a website, but it's not tailored to what you want whatsoever. There's no functionality that you like. The way it captures leads, not the way your business works. So the person needs to work perfectly with the web developer to understand and build that vision of what's the website going to look like? How's it going to function? What is it going to explain to my audience, right? The same thing occurs in AI. So if you just tell me, hey, can you write me a bunch of prompts? Or could you create this web app where I could upload documents and talk to them? It's arbitrary. I need to understand fully the expertise and kind of the pulse of your business end to end. Sometimes we'll do a walkthrough for 30 minutes, an hour, and I'll watch all your keystrokes as I'm seeing your whole process. More importantly, I'm understanding why are you doing what you're doing? Because AI is meant to supercharge for now and not meant to replace. So how can we take your existing process, which has a purpose for why you put it together the way it is, and how do we supercharge that in a way that makes sense for you, your business, and most importantly, which parts do you want to never be automated? There's some portions where someone wants a last say or a last QA check or a way to just fully personalize something. It's understanding if that place exists, and if so, where is that place? Interested to see what Jonathan thinks on that.
So I agree. Mark, you covered a lot of what I've had to say. But I think that the key word here is AI alignment. And this is something that anyone who's working in this field, whether you want to implement this for your business or if you're interested in doing work similar to both Mark and myself, just providing guardrails and helping to advance the technology. We need to make sure that this technology, it can go off the rails, and it can go off the rails very quickly. I'm sure everyone here has seen articles about, ChatGPT is getting dumber. And if AI starts feeding on itself, it can end up in a loop that we don't want it to. So I think there's actually going to be a huge field opening up in the next 10 years of just people providing guardrails for this technology. They need to understand their business process. They need to understand the pitfalls of this technology, where it can go wrong, what it going wrong looks like in the early stages so they can correct it and ensure that the supercharging that Mark talked about is still going to be on and helping businesses as opposed to tanking them.
Awesome. Yeah, very good points from both of you. And I think, like you mentioned, Jonathan, those gutter guards, for lack of a better term, are going to be so valuable because, as I mentioned, AI tools keep building and building on their success and their different technologies. And if there's no human touch involved in that, things can get really crazy. Like we've all seen the stuff that comes out of AI when no one's editing. So those are all really good points. And I think what Mark said about just being able to walk through the process specifically with someone's business and exactly tailor the needs and use AI to actually improve those processes rather than replace them entirely is really important too. And so the next question is a bit of a pivot. So this is AI-driven personalization and recommendation systems are becoming increasingly common. How do you envision these technologies evolving, and what impact could they have on customer engagement and satisfaction? We'll go to Jonathan first.
So this was actually probably my favorite question of the ones you were told to prepare. So this is one thing that I've noticed, that you listen to, like, say something on Spotify, it's just going to give you every other artist that was popular when that song came out. So a lot of these systems are taking all this data of what we're consuming and then just kind of being like, oh, well, this is kind of similar. And this is what these systems are designed to do. They're designed to find patterns, find things that are similar and kind of group them together. And so in many ways, we kind of get trapped in this recommendation loop of we're just going to keep feeding you the same thing. I think as the computing power gets better and as we start improving these systems, we're going to branch out into metrics. We're going to be doing a lot more surveys. Yes, I like this. What did you like specifically about this? Well, it got my heart racing, for instance. Okay, here's other things that people in your demographics with your similar interests also said got their heart racing. Even stuff with like the Fitbit or the Apple Watch. If you want a good recommendation for a horror movie, here's the horror movies that, jumped everybody's heart rates up the most. I think we're going to see a lot more. You'll be able to decide how customized you want your own feed to be. If you just want, all right, similar product to similar product, or do you want stuff I'm not even consciously aware of? helping recommend what you want.
Awesome. I'll take that as a finished thought. In my end, in terms of how we look at recommendation, is typically it's always been very difficult to do that type of system. It involves a lot of what's called natural language processing, in some cases AI, a lot of like nitty gritty systems. And now businesses, again, have a great equalizer where even this recommendation system can be tailored without all that heavy lifting on the tech front. So one example is I'm working with a gym chain in the West Coast of the US, where they want to take their app that kind of tracks all their members and be able to send them personalized offers based on, does this person come from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m.? Do they go to yoga? Do they do a cycling class? Usually they would be involved in a very expensive, long process to build a special made custom system just for them and their audience. Now what we're doing is we're taking all their members, we're segmenting them by the times they go to the gym, by the classes they enroll in, and then creating different buckets and just having GPT behind the scenes using the API tell us, this cohort is, your late night workout people. This is your weekend warriors. And now they're able to start tailoring their entire business to different niches and avatars that otherwise they'd never even start that journey, just because that learning curve was so high and usually the cost to even build that was so high. So we'll start seeing that wall kind of come down for all kinds of businesses, where this becomes the ability to not only cheat time, but also take advantage of typically what's been untouchable for most companies.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. And I think that's really interesting that that's kind of how AI is working, because that's how a lot of other technology has been working for almost a decade already. I mean, if you've ever looked in your social media, I forget which tab this is on Facebook, but it shows basically how it's targeting you in terms of ads, in terms of what it shows you. So just having that become more and more advanced is really interesting. And I think this question really goes out to a lot of the business owners in the room, and it's about cost and complexity. So AI implementation can sometimes be daunting for businesses due to it being expensive or difficult to implement. So how does hiring an expert in AI services, improve the use potential of these AI services? We'll hear from Jonathan first and then Mark.
Okay. So I would say that the primary concern any business owner who wants to be an early adopter in AI should be worried about is the quality of what you're getting out. And anyone who's worked with data, and this has been the mantra for hundreds of years, is garbage in, garbage out. If you have a system that's not catered to your business, it is not catered to your industry, you're not going to get very good data out of it. If you have one that's constantly going off the rails and is given too much control over decision making and is not being monitored, it's going to harm your business more than help it. And given how fast these systems also move, that can be very scary, especially for large companies that are going to be quick, that will not be quick to correct mistakes before they become catastrophic. And that's why I said I touched on earlier that there is going to end up being a field of people who know how to use AI and know its quirks, and are just going to be serving as that guardrail, just to avoid having catastrophic results. And I think once we start seeing the banks jump on this, and manufacturing, like high-tech manufacturing, will probably be the first couple to do this, they will be defining the field as far as how it will trickle down through the rest of the industries. And I'll toss over to Mark for more.
That's awesome. No, I'll use that answer as a segue. So I'll bring it back more to simple nuts and bolts. So the average person right now that's never used AI and is more of the do-it-yourself kind of person is not going to be like the cost of hiring someone to help you and expedite that process is going to be minimal compared to the cost of what I like to call ignorance debt. So sometimes you build the whole process and you do this thing because you watch 3 YouTube videos, and then you realize after having a 10-minute conversation with an expert that all you did is you prolong the process that could be streamlined in probably maybe 1 hour's work using the right tool, writing the right prompt, connecting the 2 things together that need to be connected to make ChatGPT talk to XYZ. It could be a system, could be your documents, etc. So you can really cheat time by hiring an expert that's kind of been there, been in that room, knows what it feels like, what it smells like, and has encountered that problem before or with a client, and can help you save all those months of maybe hitting yourself against the wall and being like, maybe this can't be automated, and just answering that question very quickly and giving you options.
Very cool. And thank you both for that. I'm actually going to throw an audience question at you both that is just literally an extension of that last question, which I think is awesome. So when hiring someone for support with AI, what are some of the things that we should look to optimize the opportunity of hiring someone like you? So we'll go ahead. We'll hear from Mark first, then Jonathan.
Sure. I would put an asterisk to my answer that it depends exactly what you want them to do. Do you want them to implement the tool? Do you want them to write the prompt, or do you want them to build the system? If it's the very last one, I always, even in my company, for my consultancy, we hire based on testing. So not only do I know XYZ frameworks on how to build this product, show me your portfolio of like the examples you've done before. How do you deal with this type of scenario? So asking more deep questions to make sure it's not a surface level, yeah, I've used that thing before. On the first two components, you want to really want to ask them, if you're not learning an interview in the first 10 minutes from your candidate you're interviewing, likely not to be the best fit, especially in the AI space. So when I speak to anyone, or when I talk to anyone like, for example, Jonathan, I will learn something the first 5-10 minutes that I didn't know about his domain. If you're learning, that's a really good indicator that you probably have some idea of what they're talking about. But beyond that, it's really understanding, if they look at your business and they come up with, off the top of their head, 4 or 5 ways that they could streamline things, what would those ways be? So more so test these individuals based on application, not on saying, yeah, I've used ChatGPT for 9 months, because I could use that tool for 9 months and just make emails and poems all day. What did you use it for? Show me an example. How do you approach this type of problem? Those are my 2 cents, though, but maybe Jonathan has different thoughts.
No, I have just one thing to add to what Mark said. I think his answer was fantastic and covered a lot. What I think for businesses is you're going to need domain experts who have these skills. I think we're back to the late 70s, early 80s, when the PC revolution was just starting up. Who has the computer skills? We're just going to repeat that over again. So you're going to need somebody who can understand and will speak as an expert in your industry, will be teaching you things, as Mark said, and then also understands whether they can build a system or just know how to use an existing one, depending on your needs, the price point you're looking to pay for salary. You're going to want that combination of tools.
Great. Really good advice. And this is a kind of a simpler question following in the same vein, but someone said, I started to make an app and I realized it will need to evolve over time. Is this something Mark and Jonathan could help with? So Mark, you want to take this one?
No, that's an awesome question. I think a lot of people that I speak to on a daily basis encounter that. So there's this element to, before you build the thing, try to think of a way to future-proof it as much as possible. And part of future-proofing it is creating components of it that are designed to change. For example, if like right now, the OpenAI API is the best way to connect to a backend to use ChatGPT, you want to make sure that you create your app in a way that you can substitute that out for, like Jonathan said, the next program that's coming out of a garage in the next couple months that's 10 times better than OpenAI. So if you design your apps, your applications, to be nimble while still being able to accomplish the thing you're trying to accomplish right now, it'll help position you in a way that as things get better, as things get more streamlined, all you have to do is kind of like having different Lego blocks. You just sub one for another, and it keeps working, and it keeps doing the thing, but better and maybe cheaper and faster.
And I can add on to that, that there's still a lot of human input that's going into training these models to ensure that they're correct. And I know I've been touching on that a lot, but that is something I can certainly help with, if I may advertise myself a little bit. But it's just making sure that you have experts who are going to constantly be helping any new tools you're developing, any iterations or new Lego blocks, ensure that they're still as accurate as the old one, and continue to evolve your system in the way you want it to go.
Great. Thank you both for that. And I think, both of those expertise areas are so necessary as business owners, like both developing, creating the technology, and then also, as Jonathan keeps saying, editing, making sure that it doesn't go off the rails. This is a more specific question also from the audience. And it's, have you used AI to automate library processes, like as in creating a digital library? Jonathan, do you want to take this one first?
Yes. So I've not fully created a document itself, but I'm actually working on a project right now where I'm trying to gather as much information on water quality in a U.S. state, and I'm not sure how much my client wants me to share. So a U.S. state from all the different city governments and their municipal water. And so what I've been doing is having just Bing search saying, all right, I need these 100 cities. Can you pull up their consumer quality water report, which is something that's standardized by the EPA. So it's kind of, you're looking for the same thing. It's going to be titled the same thing. And I was able to pull about 70 of the 100 cities I needed. And it just gave me the links directly to the site where I could download the PDF and build. And I'm sure Mark is a bit more technologically advanced than I am. I'm actually curious to see what he's been working on in that realm.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll answer that question being specific, but also like broad, because I feel like the answer could cover a wide variety of domains. So if you want to look at a business or an industry and see, can AI actually do something here? You want to look at two things. One, are there processes that are repeatable and done in a very systematic way? That's one. Two, are there any ground truths that have patterns in the business? So one example with the library is you have what's called, I think, the Dewey Decimal Classification, where like you have those little decimals at the end of books that denote which part they should be in. When I see that type of pattern, I'm like, okay, right away, you can create a recommendation system. You can create a categorization system. You can talk to some web app. Let's say it's a library web app. You say, hey, I really like this type of books. I like The Lord of the Rings. Can you give me a couple of recommendations that are just like it, with the same length, with the same genre, that type of thing. And it's more so, it's like, how many things can you measure? The more things you can measure, like the number of pages per book you have in that library, the genres, the Dewey Decimal codes, then you can start to kind of deconstruct that problem. And you get to your problem space where you're like, you know what? I can make it a way so that anyone that has like a history of renting books from a library, we could feed that all in as input to their personal library assistant to always recommend them the next book, or tell them which part of the book to first read, see if it's for them, if they know that a certain type of topic's compelling to them. So very loaded way to get to answer the question, but it's more so, what can you measure? And you work backwards from that to see what can you accomplish.
Awesome. Yeah, I love, Mark, that you heard digital library and you went straight to like the library. But yeah, that is a very valuable just method of suggesting new things for people. So I think that's really interesting. And both your answers were really helpful there. The other question, I keep pulling audience questions because they're just
they're good questions.
Yeah, they're so good. I'm never going to get to my own questions.
Keeps us hot.
But this one's really interesting. And it's, any idea on how AI could impact supply chains, i.e. planning, production, logistics, and customer service? Are there any real cases already? So I'll throw it to Mark first.
I wanted to gestate on that for a bit, but
too bad.
No, this company in Dubai that goes between Italy and Spain, and they're trying to automate parts of their supply chain when it comes to truffle transportation. So one thing that they have is they have a system where they record, the weight of the boxes, the average time to ship between different vendors. And so far, they've been doing it in a relationship-based manner. Like, we're going to choose this vendor, and we use this supplier and this distributor just because of purely relationships. But if they were able, like what we're trying to do right now is take all the information of every supplier and distributor and try to see like, what is the path of least resistance to getting your truffles from Spain to Dubai in the quickest way? Because the quicker you can do that, the quicker you can sell them. And just for context, truffles, as soon as you pick them up, within 4 or 5 days, I learned this yesterday, they die. And those are $1,000 per kilogram. So in terms of that supply chain, they're trying to see what parts of the supply chain that we're using our gut feel and instinct to make really hard decisions that we kind of offload to AI to maybe make a better recommendation from a procedural standpoint and, more importantly, a financial standpoint. Jonathan, any thoughts on that one?
So, surprise for the panel as well. In a past life prior to jumping into the AI field, I actually worked in supply chain for a major baked good company. So in many ways, there's kind of very rudimentary AI already being used. You see this a lot in software like, I'm going to just throw out RoadNet and LlamaSoft, where they will actually train basically just GPS to find the fastest route and pull in like traffic data from Google, and be able to optimize times depending on when your load goes out, when it's due in, and your specific schedule. A lot of that's kind of very simple. I think where we're going to start to really see it take off is going to be in kind of the very fast-moving goods. So like food production, like Mark mentioned with the truffles. AI systems may say, okay, well, we can go, south with this, but oh wait, there's a heat wave going on in North Africa. It might actually give us an extra 3 hours on our truffles, just as an example, if we stay north, even though it's the longer route. They'll be a little bit fresher when they get to market. So be able to incorporate weather data. I know a lot of these big tanker ships are already pretty much fully automated. Now imagine that they know ahead of time, all right, 500 kilometers down in the ocean, there's a hurricane, we need to get around. And they'll be able to pull around and prevent shipping delays and get around weather systems already with a small skeleton crew if anything goes wrong. But they're pretty much driving themselves anyway. So just kind of adding that functionality. And since I know it's going to be a big one, self-driving trucks are still 20 years off. So sorry to anyone who's struggling to get truckers.
One more thing on that, just because my previous job was at Amazon, so I got to see exactly what was automated in that supply chain, which is humongous. A lot. Imagine that promise you get when you go on Amazon, you buy something, it says guaranteed delivery date. In order for that to truly be guaranteed, that system behind the scenes has a huge AI running it that says, what is the way that we can guarantee that this product in North Carolina is going to get to New York in 2 days or less? And that whole operation is already managed by AI, let alone the warehouses that have a lot of those, if you've ever seen before, those carriages that are driven by AI optical systems to get the right product to the picker to package it up and send it off. So that's already there. The technology is there. And right now we're talking about surface level AI, but supply chain wise, there's always ways and right now underway that are integrating it.
Hardware is going to be more the restriction than the software in that front.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And to your point, Jonathan, I definitely thought self-driving trucks were already happening. So
they exist, but once you get through all the regulatory hurdles and ensuring that they're actually safer than having drivers behind the wheel, it's still going to be some time.
Yes, but yeah, that's a really good example of software being faster than hardware, I guess. So very interesting. And so we're actually going to pivot a little bit on the next question. And rather than talking exactly about how AI can be implemented into a business, I want to focus a little more on tools again. So the landscape of AI tools and platforms is evolving rapidly. How do you stay up to date with the latest AI trends and technologies? And how do you determine which ones are most suitable for your projects? I know our audience always loves this question, so figured I'd throw it at you. We'll do Jonathan first, then Mark.
Sure. So most of my clients tell me what they want me to use. And I think with the exception of once, where it was a guy who was actually training his own model, they want me to use Bing, they want me to use ChatGPT, OpenAI, and they want me to use Google. That being said, I think there's a lot of hype right now. A lot of people are looking to, make their quick buck. They're going to have a system that looks really impressive on the surface. It's going to do some pretty cool things in demo, and probably not going to deliver. Big companies, look who's backing some of these systems. If you want to know the good ones to use, and then kind of in that same realm, there's a lot of in the writing field these detector bots that universities are starting to use. Again, I've put the same article in fully ChatGPT created. I touched nothing on it into like 5 or 6 different ones and got a completely different result in all 6. This is going to be something that's going to be big in the news this year as schools start ramping up and start trying to crack down on students using these tools to cheat. So be even more careful about detector bots necessarily than the new technology. But again, I just say the tried and true. And if somebody wants me to look at a new software, I'm more than happy to. And I rely on my clients to tell me what to use. And I'll toss over to Mark.
Nice. I feel like Jonathan is much luckier than I am because I'm usually asked what AI tool do I need to use instead of being told which one. But I'll drop some heat here in terms of tooling that might be helpful. So I do 3 things to stay on top of it. Actually, 4 things I led. But one is I follow a site called There's an AI for That. So it's an actual site that tracks by the day the newest AI tool that's been released, whether it's awesome, whether it's awful. You can preview the website, you can see how it works, and you can test it out. Another one's called Futurepedia that I use. It's like Wikipedia, but for not only AI solutions, but AI concepts, frameworks, new programs, stuff like that. Third thing is I subscribe literally to every single AI newsletter out there. And then I'll do a quick scan every day to see, is there something in one that's not in the other that really jumps out at me? Is there a brand new program, framework? Is there a agent GPT? Is there an auto GPT, a new version of that? And the last one is I try to summarize to myself every day the top 5 things. And that's why I write my own newsletter too, where I summarize of the 100 things I saw in one day, what are the things that are the top 5 impactful ones that I think might change the way I do things tomorrow. So I'm not saying everyone should do all 4 of those. Even like 1 or 2 is good enough to kind of keep a good tempo and a good pulse for what's happening.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. And I think everyone will really want to know the names of all those newsletters. So maybe I'll get them from you after this. We can share them in the follow-up. How do we get in touch with these individuals? Do you have a link? Well, you can go to this wonderful website called Fiverr. And both of their usernames are actually in their name tags at this broadcast. I'll also be sharing them in the caption of all of our different live streams and in the follow-up email. So you'll be able to contact both Mark and Jonathan for all of your AI needs. So happy to throw that out there for you. Another question that I wanted to drop in, and this kind of goes back to Jonathan, I know you mentioned a couple of times people cracking down on AI and introducing regulations. Data privacy and security are significant concerns when working with AI and technology in general. How do you address these concerns while developing AI-enhanced solutions that involve sensitive data? We'll go ahead and toss it to Jonathan.
So this is, in the writing and editing world, incredibly sensitive, and quite literally, it's possible that all this goes away overnight. I think it's 3-4 weeks ago now, one of the lower circuit courts in the United States said you cannot copyright AI-generated artwork. With the lawsuit that's going on against OpenAI, led by, actually fiction writers, Sarah Silverman is the name that popped right into my head. It's a good chance that that's going to get shut down too. That's going to be a political fight for the next 18 months or so. So that's something I would caution. When you're using these tools, there are some times where I'll find a sentence that's like, oh, that's way too well written to be just the AI synthesizing through its black box. I can copy that, drop it right into Google Scholar, and pull up the exact journal it was taken from. Often without citation. In fact, because of the crackdowns at university, OpenAI and ChatGPT has actually restricted being able to cite specifically. That's going to be something that it's going to evolve. I don't want to try and prognosticate. I think we've been too quick to regulate, but at the same time, that's going to need to be something that has to get hashed out between academics, authors, and people working with this technology, just to ensure that we're respecting copyright, we're still citing, but we're not making a tool that's going to make learning irrelevant for people. And I'll toss to Mark for more thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll speak to it more from the implementation side. That's the part I'm comfortable with. So kind of like there's 3 main ways to implement this stuff that can be secure. And secure meaning SOC 2, HIPAA, and the whole lot. So contrary to popular belief, Microsoft owns half of OpenAI. What that actually means is that they get access to all of OpenAI's models and they can throw it into their secure environment, Azure. So one thing that we do for clients is we can use OpenAI's API, but within Azure. So all the calls are made within your cloud, and it's encrypted and never leaves that space. So if you like using OpenAI, you wish you could use it, but you can't, that's a really good substitute for you. Number 2 is there's almost 100,000 open source large language models in the past 6 months. So probably the top 2, meaning Falcon 180 just came out, Llama 2 just came out. Those are alternatives that are really well performing, and they can run open source in your environment, and it doesn't send an API call to anywhere. So your data talks to only that resource. And the third one is the hardest one and most expensive, which is running things offline. So how do you basically install a large language model on a GPU on your computer or a server and talk directly to that to make sure that, again, everything's containerized in one environment so that you're always making sure there's no API calls made anywhere. Hopefully it's not too long-winded, but I just wanted to squeeze that all in.
Thank you, Mark. And I actually had a follow-up question from the audience for you. And it's for Mark, how are you dealing with copyright issues where AI is pulling from third-party sources?
Interesting question. So it depends on the domain we're talking about. So if we're talking about Jonathan's domain, in terms of like, how do you know this thing about this person, or how do you know this thing about this resource? A lot of times when it comes to understanding that, there's like a prompt hack we try to use, saying at the bottom of the prompt, try and explain where you got this information from or which source you sourced this from. And sometimes in its training, it actually took that information in and can spit that out. But in terms of being 100% accurate, that part we haven't figured out fully yet. Not sure. I would kind of defer to Jonathan if he has better techniques for that.
I'd say for me is just ask it to keep rephrasing, and try different ways of rephrasing. So say, explain this to a child, explain this to somebody who has an expertise in the back end of AI, but is not very good at prompt generation, that kind of deal. And eventually you'll get to it, or you can just completely reconstruct whatever it learned off of in the beginning. You can go either way with it.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. And a follow-up question for you here, Jonathan, and Mark, you can tap in after Jonathan also, is can you share an example of how well-crafted prompts have led to improved outcomes?
Yes. So I am a huge fan of just prompting as many different ways as possible. So sometimes I'll even have GPT say, all right, I need 20 different prompts on this topic. And then I'll re-prompt all of that. And so that gives me a mass of paragraphs to work from and kind of edit and massage to what I need. I think I actually did have a specific one. Yeah. I can run through my notes here. Sorry, everybody. Yes. So, for instance, okay. One thing I did, and I'm going to go back to the Formula One example, is okay, I want to explain the new regulations. And so I say, okay, explain the new regulations to me. And it kind of gives me an outline of here are the regulations for the 2023 season. And then I say, okay, explain how the floor works in the new regulations. And it'll explain how the floor works. And from there, you just keep asking it more and more follow-up questions, more and more detailed questions, feeding off its previous answers. And it will give you a very complete answer as if you're having a conversation. They are chatbots at the end of the day. So kind of treating it as if it were an expert that you can just keep harassing with new questions has given me kind of the best results for more detailed articles like that. And I toss over to Mark if he has anything to add.
Yeah, it's actually low-key my favorite question of the whole session, because that's what I do day in and day out. So I'll make it super brief. 3 really cool tips and how they enhance. So through a lot of studies on large language models, GPT and similar, they remember the beginning of your prompt and the end of your prompt the most. So the way I design my prompts is typically I have placeholders, like I call them variables, where you have squiggly lines that say you are a, and then your role in brackets. And then I reference that role at the bottom and I say role equals whatever. That helps you not only make sure that GPT is taking your most important factors into account, but it makes it really easy to switch up which variables you're subbing into that prompt. That's 1. 2 is I like building a training wheel prompt for everybody. So I'll give you some free solicitation here. So the way I structure it is you have context that you give it. And you actually spell it out. This is context. This is the task. And then this is the instruction I'm giving you. And this is what I want you to pay attention to. So I call it points of clarification. And then after that, I kind of give it at a variable heading, and then I give it some love there. And then the third way, which is underused, is give it an example of the thing you're trying to build in your prompts. So if you want to build an email and you have an example of your email that you really like, throw that in there, and then it'll use that as its basis. So three hacks.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Mark. And I know we're coming to the end of our broadcast here. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I'd encourage anyone who hasn't already, go ahead, throw your questions into that QR code. Still want to hear from you. And I wanted to pose this question about efficiency to both of you. AI technologies can automate tasks that were previously time-consuming. Can you provide an example of how such automation has freed up resources or enabled your clients to focus on more strategic aspects of their businesses? This is really good intel for the business owners in the audience. We'll hear from, who went first last time?
I did.
All right. We'll hear from Mark first this time.
Cool. Yeah, I'm pumped to answer this question. So yesterday I had a real estate firm from, I think it was Abu Dhabi, reach out and say that they have a problem that they basically hired a part-time CFO. So they have a CSV that has all their cash flow, all their income statements, and they have to wait 1 to 2 months just to get a response back as to how much money do we have? Can we buy this thing? How much working capital do we have? What I did that streamlined the whole process in a few prompts and using one technology is using ChatGPT's newest feature. It's called Advanced Data Analysis. They uploaded their CSVs, they anonymized all the private things to their business, and they just asked the questions. What's our cash flow looking like? How are we doing in terms of balance sheet health? And they started asking it, and then they started asking, can you forecast what the next 3 months might look like? These are questions they would usually wait 1 to 2 months, have a couple calls just to answer. But now that whole process has been streamlined. They can talk to their own financial statements. They can get kind of control of their financial future without relying on multiple parties and a lot of yin and yang mishmashing. So that's one example from my side. Interested to hear what Jonathan's experience is.
So for me, and I touched on this a little earlier in the talk, it's resource gathering. When you're working in factual articles, research, that kind of thing, to be able to just say, okay, I need, Google, please find, or Bing, please find me, 50 different articles on this particular topic. And then let me sort out what are the most relevant. This is something that you spend a full semester on in grad school, doing your literature review, and kind of the ability to just grab as many of those as you possibly can all at once, and then get summaries from them where possible. I think that's going to be just immense to help really advance research and technology. Whereas now that's kind of what jams up all the bureaucracy behind this, and especially when applying for money before you can even pose the question, saying, all right, here's all the research behind this, here's where we're going to take it. And I think being able to save that time is going to really help advance technology very, very quickly once we've perfected these systems.
Great. Yeah. Thank you both for sharing. And I think efficiency is something we've come back to again and again. And I think it's definitely one of the main reasons that AI exists in the first place. So really good application for both of you. I wanted to pose this final question because I know we've only got a couple minutes left. And this user says, I mainly joined this webinar to learn how I can use AI to help me with SEO, as that's a priority with my work. I'm not sure where to start. Is there a good app I can put on my online store to help with that? Either of you can take that first.
Sure. I not necessarily to put on their online store necessarily, because I would have to ask which one, what kind, all that stuff.
Right.
But in terms of optimizing SEO, right now, if you use another feature in ChatGPT Plus, it's called plugins. If you go into that, you'll see it's the equivalent of an app store on your phone, but in GPT. Right? SEO. You will see a couple really cool tools. One of them is called SEMBot. You can load your site as a URL, and then it will go through that site and tell you which portions of it to reword to optimize for ranking and SEO in a better way. And it'll explain to you the mechanics of why it's thinking what it's thinking. And you combine that with a couple more apps, one that maybe scrapes websites for you, one that kind of looks at competitor websites and compares their SEO. All of a sudden, you have an SEO consultant at your fingertips. So that would be my 2 cents there.
Yep. Not all that much to add, other than it can be done with even just the free softwares that are available. If you're just getting started, you can put it into ChatGPT and say, hey, what are some of the search keywords for this competitor website? What about this one? What about this one? Okay, now here's my website, optimize the language that I'm using here. Tell me what, reword it so that it more closely matches the optimized top results in Google, Bing, whichever search engine you are looking to use.
That's really interesting. I did not know that you could do that. So really good information for me too, guys. Thank you. It's now 4 p.m. So we unfortunately, I'm sure we could have this conversation for another 3 hours. We unfortunately do have to wrap up. Did want to address a few of the questions that have come up about whether there'll be a replay or notes of this webinar. The answer is absolutely yes. It will be available on our YouTube. I'll be sharing an email following the event with a link to that, and it'll also be just posted there on our Facebook, on our LinkedIn, so you can always find it. And again, Jonathan and Mark, both active on Fiverr. Their Fiverr usernames are in their name tags right there. So really hope you all reach out to them for all your AI needs. I wanted to say a huge thank you to Jonathan and Mark for coming on today. You both did an amazing job. I feel like we all learned so much. And thanks to everyone else who joined today as well.
Yeah. And thank you, Liz, for hosting. This was a lot of fun, and I hope to do it again soon.
Yeah, thank you to the audience for the awesome questions. Keep them coming.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.